Divorced mom inherits Crumbling bookstore, then uncovers its $250 million secret. They called it a joke. Her siblings rolled their eyes when their father left her a crumbling old bookstore instead of cash. Take the $75,000 and walk away, they mocked. But the moment she found the brass key and unlocked the underground door, they realized she hadn't inherited junk. She'd inherited a $250 million secret that could destroy them. Before diving into this extraordinary tale, tell us in the comments where you're reading from, and don't forget to hit like if you're ready for a story of unexpected triumphs. The fluorescent lights of the Daily Grind Cafe flickered overhead as Liana Thorne balanced 3 plates of scrambled eggs and hash browns along her forearm. Her uniform was spattered with small stains from a double shift that had begun at 5 a.m. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she maintained a warm smile for her customers. "Order up for table 7, she called, sliding the plates in front of a family of tourists. "Can I get you folks anything else?" The father glanced up from his phone. "We're good," he said. Liana nodded and moved to her next table, checking her watch. 2 more hours until her shift ended, and then she had to pick up the twins from school. Elara and Saren were 11 now, bright girls with their father's dark eyes and her own stubborn determination. The thought of them gave her strength when her feet ached and her back screamed from hours of carrying heavy trays. As she refilled coffee cups, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Normally Liana wouldn't check it during her shift, but Elara and Saren's school appeared on the screen. With a quick apology to her table, she stepped away to answer. "Ms. Thorne, this is Principal Davison. I'm calling about Saren." Liana's heart sank. "Is she all right?" "She's fine physically, but there was an incident with another student. Apparently there were some comments made about your living situation." Saren responded rather forcefully. Liana closed her eyes. "She hit someone?" "No, but her verbal response was quite colorful. We need you to come in for a meeting. I'm working a double shift today. Could we?" "Ms. Thorne, this is the 3rd incident this month." Liana glanced at her manager, who was already giving her a disapproving look. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said, knowing this would cost her dearly, both in lost wages and her boss's goodwill. After a tense conversation with her manager, Liana hurried to her car, a 15-year-old sedan with peeling paint and a passenger door that sometimes refused to open. As she drove to the school, her phone rang again. The screen displayed Marcus, her brother's name. She hesitated before answering. Conversations with her brother rarely brought good news. "Hello," she said, putting him on speaker. "Liana, where are you? I've been trying to reach you all morning." Marcus' voice was sharp, impatient. "I'm working, Marcus. Some of us have jobs that don't come with assistants to answer our phones." He ignored the barb. "Dad's attorney called. They've scheduled the will reading for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Liana's grip tightened on the steering wheel. It had been 6 weeks since her father's heart attack, 6 weeks of grief that she'd had to push aside to keep food on the table and a roof over her daughters' heads. Robert Sterling had been her anchor, the one person in her family who never made her feel less than. Now he was gone, and the wound still felt fresh. "I have a shift tomorrow," she said. "Cancel it," Marcus replied. "This is important, Liana. The whole family will be there." By the whole family, Liana knew he meant himself, their sister Vivian, and their respective spouses, the successful branches of the Thorne family tree. Not her ex-husband David, who had left her for his secretary 3 years ago and now lived in a lakeside condo while she struggled to make rent on a 2-bedroom apartment. "I'll try," she said finally, "but I can't promise anything." Marcus sighed, the sound crackling through the car's speakers. "This is exactly why Dad worried about you. You never prioritize the right things." Before Liana could respond, he continued, "Vivian and I have been handling all the funeral arrangements, the estate paperwork, everything, while you've been serving pancakes. The least you could do is show up for the reading." Liana pulled into the school parking lot, her hands shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I'll be there," she said. "I have to go." She ended the call before Marcus could say anything else, taking a moment to compose herself before heading into the school. This was her reality now, racing between work and her daughter's needs, enduring her siblings' condescension, and grieving alone for the father who had been her only ally. The meeting with Principal Davison went as expected. Saren sat stone-faced in the corner while the principal expressed concerns about her adjustment difficulties. The other student, a girl named Chloe, whose mother headed the PDA, had reportedly commented that Saren's clothes were probably from a dumpster. Saren responded by saying some very inappropriate things about Chloe's character and parentage, the principal explained, his expression stern. Liana looked at her daughter, whose chin was raised defiantly despite the tears shimmering in her eyes. "I understand that Saren's response wasn't appropriate," Liana said carefully, "but it sounds like Chloe was bullying her about our financial situation." Principal Davison cleared his throat. "We're speaking with Chloe's parents as well, of course, but given Saren's pattern of outbursts, we're recommending counseling." Counseling? They couldn't afford another expense to somehow squeeze from her already stretched budget. "We'll work on it at home," Liana promised, placing a hand on Saren's shoulder. As they walked to the car, Saren finally spoke. "I'm not sorry," she said, her voice small but determined. "She says that stuff all the time." Liana unlocked the car. "I know it's hard, but we can't let people like that see they've gotten to us." "Dad would have let me fight back," Saren muttered, climbing into the back seat. "He said sometimes you have to stand up for yourself." Liana felt a fresh wave of grief wash over her. David had been largely absent since the divorce, appearing for occasional weekends and school events when it suited him. His child support payments were sporadic at best, despite his well-paying job. Yet somehow, in the twins' eyes, he remained the fun parent, the one who understood them. "Your father says a lot of things," Liana replied, keeping her voice neutral, "but he's not the one dealing with phone calls from the school." Saren fell silent, staring out the window as they drove back to their apartment. Elara would be waiting for them, probably hungry and worried about her sister. Liana would have just enough time to make them a quick dinner before heading back for the evening shift she'd abandoned. More hours lost, more income they couldn't afford to miss. As they turned onto their street, Liana spotted a sleek black SUV parked in front of their building. Her sister Vivian stood beside it, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, sunglasses perched on her perfectly highlighted hair despite the cloudy day. "What's she doing here?" Saren asked. Liana parked and braced herself. Vivian rarely visited their apartment, and when she did, it was never without purpose. "Aunt Vivian." Saren called as they approached, her tone suddenly bright. Liana recognized the act. Saren knew that appearing happy and well-adjusted would irritate Vivian, who seemed to expect them to be visibly suffering at all times. Vivian removed her sunglasses, revealing expertly applied makeup that concealed any evidence that she too had lost her father 6 weeks ago. "Saren darling," she said, offering air kisses, "how are you bearing up?" "I'm good," Saren replied cheerfully. "Mom's teaching me how to make Dad's special empanadas." Vivian's gaze flicked to Liana, a flash of something, annoyance, surprise, crossing her features. "How therapeutic," she said. "Liana, could we speak privately?" Inside the cramped apartment, Elara was at the small kitchen table, textbooks spread around her. Unlike her sister, Elara channeled her feelings into academics, maintaining perfect grades despite everything. She looked up as they entered, her expression brightening briefly at the sight of her aunt before returning to its usual careful neutrality. "Aunt Vivian," she said politely, standing to offer a hug that Vivian returned stiffly. "Girls, why don't you go to your room while I talk to your aunt?" Liana suggested, setting down her purse. Once the twins had disappeared behind their bedroom door, Vivian surveyed the apartment with barely concealed disdain. Her eyes lingered on the sagging couch, the mismatched dishes drying by the sink, the water stain on the ceiling that the landlord had promised to fix months ago. "Marcus said you were being difficult about tomorrow," she said. Liana sighed, too tired for pretense. "I wasn't being difficult. I was being realistic. I have to work. It's Dad's will reading, Liana. Surely even you can arrange coverage for one afternoon. Even you." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Even you, the family disappointment. Even you, the one who couldn't keep her marriage together. Even you, the college dropout working as a waitress at 38. "I already told Marcus I'll be there," Liana said, keeping her voice level. "Is that all you came to say?" Vivian moved to the small window, looking out at the view of the parking lot. "No, actually. I wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus and I have been going through Dad's finances." Something in her tone made Liana tense. And it's worse than we thought. The bookstore has been losing money for years. There are back taxes, outstanding loans. Vivian turned, her expression a practiced blend of concern and resignation. Dad wasn't the best businessman. We all know that. Liana felt a familiar defensiveness rise within her. He managed to support a family of 5 and put you and Marcus through college on that bookstore's income. That was 20 years ago, before the big chains moved in. The last few years have been difficult. Marcus and I have been helping him make ends meet. This was news to Liana. He never mentioned that to me. Vivian's smile was thin. He wouldn't, would he? Not to you. He always wanted to be your hero. The words stung because they contained a grain of truth. Robert had always protected Liana, from childhood bullies to her siblings' criticisms, to her ex-husband's cruelty. Even when she'd made mistakes, dropping out of college to marry David, putting her own ambitions on hold to support his career. "Why are you telling me this now?" Liana asked. "Because the estate is complicated. There are debts to settle. The property to deal with. Marcus and I think it's best if we handle everything. You have enough on your plate with." She gestured vaguely at the apartment. "All this. I want to help," Liana insisted. "Dad was my father too." "Of course he was," Vivian said, her tone softening into something almost patronizing. "But let's be practical. What do you know about estate law or property management?" Before Liana could respond, the front door opened and David appeared, still in his sales director's suit, his expression thunderous. He barely acknowledged Vivian before turning to Liana. "Where's Saren?" he demanded. "I got a call from the school." Liana felt a headache building behind her eyes. "She's in her room. There was an incident with another student. It's been handled." David's face reddened. "Handled? This is the 3rd time this month, Liana. If you can't control her, perhaps I should go," Vivian interjected smoothly, clearly uncomfortable witnessing this domestic discord. She gathered her designer purse and slipped past David with a murmured, "Good to see you." Once Vivian had left, David lowered his voice, aware the twins might hear. "This is exactly what I was talking about in our last custody discussion. Your living situation, your work hours, the girls need stability." Liana felt her patience snap. What they need is a father who pays his child support on time and doesn't cancel weekends when his new wife makes other plans. David's jaw tightened. "Stella and I have a lot of social obligations. And if you'd accepted the promotion they offered you at the insurance office instead of quitting." "I quit because they expected me to work 60-hour weeks for barely more than I make now, with no flexibility for the girls' schedules." Liana cut him off. David had never understood why she couldn't just make it work the way other divorced mothers did. He conveniently forgot that those women often had family support, reliable co-parents, or exes who actually paid their court-ordered child support. David glanced at his watch. "I have a dinner meeting. Tell Saren I expect better behavior." "And Liana," he added, his voice dripping with condescension, "try to get it together for the girl's sake." After he left, Liana leaned against the closed door. She should be getting ready for her evening shift, not dealing with family drama. But bills waited for no one, especially single mothers with twins and unreliable child support. The bedroom door cracked open, and Alara peered out. "Is Dad gone?" Liana nodded, attempting a smile. "He had a meeting." "Come on out, both of you. I need to make you dinner before I go back to work." As she pulled pasta from the cupboard, Saren emerged, her expression stormy. "I heard him. He thinks we should live with him and Stella." "He didn't say that," Liana replied. "He doesn't even want us there," Alara said quietly. "Stella calls us the baggage when she thinks we can't hear." Liana paused in filling the pot with water. "She what?" Saren nodded. "Last time we stayed over, she told her friend on the phone that she was stuck with the baggage for the weekend. That's why I don't want to go there anymore." This was new information, and it made her blood boil. But she forced herself to remain calm. "I'll talk to your father about it." "No," both girls said in unison. "He'll just deny it," Alara explained. "And then Stella will be even worse next time." Liana looked at her daughters, these perceptive, resilient girls who were navigating a world much more complicated than any 11-year-old should have to face. They'd lost their grandfather, endured their parents' divorce, and now dealt with school bullies and a stepmother who resented their very existence. "What would you like me to do?" she asked them. The twins exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations that never ceased to amaze Liana. "Nothing," Saren said finally. "We can handle Stella. Just don't make us go there more than we have to." Liana nodded slowly. "Okay, but promise you'll tell me if things get worse." As she cooked dinner, a simple pasta with sauce from a jar, nothing like the elaborate meals her father used to prepare, Liana's mind returned to Vivian's visit and the upcoming reading. What had her sister meant about the bookstore's finances? Robert had owned the old tome for as long as Liana could remember. It was a small operation on the edge of town, with stacks of well-loved books and a tiny reading nook attached. In recent years, business had slowed as bigger chains opened nearby, but her father had always seemed to make ends meet. Had he really been struggling so much that Marcus and Vivian had been helping him financially? And if so, why hadn't he ever mentioned it to Liana? The thought that her father might have been suffering silently, too proud to admit his difficulties, broke her heart. After dinner, Liana changed back into her waitress uniform and called Mrs. Petrova from the apartment upstairs, who watched the twins when Liana worked evenings. Another expense she could barely afford. "I shouldn't be later than 11 o'clock, Liana told the older woman as she prepared to leave. "The girls have homework to finish and then bed by 9:30, please." "Don't worry," Mrs. Petrova assured her, "we will be fine." The evening shift at the Daily Grind Cafe was busy, a small blessing that kept Liana too occupied to dwell on the day's events. Still, as she carried plates and wiped tables, her mind kept returning to tomorrow's will reading. What would her father have left behind? Certainly not much of material value if Vivian was to be believed. The memories came unbidden as she worked. Her father taught her to change a tire when she was 10. His patient voice guided her through math homework. The pride in his eyes when she won the art competition in high school. His quiet support when she told him she was pregnant at 22 and David had proposed. Even after the divorce, when her siblings made their disappointment abundantly clear, Robert had never wavered. "Life is not a straight road, my dear," he would say. "Sometimes the most beautiful views come after the hardest climbs." By the time Liana returned home, paid Mrs. Petrova, and checked on her sleeping daughters, it was nearly midnight. She should sleep. Tomorrow would be another long day. But instead, she found herself pulling out the old photo album her father had given her last Christmas. "So you remember where you come from?" he had said, his English still heavily accented even after 45 years in America. The album was filled with photos of Robert as a young man, newly arrived from his homeland with nothing but determination and a dream. There he was outside the old tome the day he bought it, his smile wide and proud. Liana as a toddler sitting on his shoulders. Family picnics. Birthdays. Graduations. Robert had documented it all, creating a visual history of their family's journey. The last photo in the album was recent. Robert with the twins at their 10th birthday party. His health had already been failing, though he'd hidden it well. Now, looking at the picture, Liana could see the fatigue in his eyes, the slight strain in his smile. Liana closed the album, wiping away tears. Tomorrow she would face her siblings, her ex-husband, and the reality of her father's estate. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply grieve the man who had been her constant support. "I miss you, Poppy," she whispered into the quiet apartment. The next day dawned gray and drizzly, matching Liana's mood as she prepared for the will reading. She had called in sick for her morning shift. Her manager had been understanding but firm. One more absence this month would put her job at risk. After seeing the twins off to school with extra tight hugs, Liana stood before her closet, considering her options. She didn't own many formal outfits. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress she'd worn to a wedding last year, paired with her only decent pair of heels. As she applied minimal makeup, Liana's phone rang. It was David again. "I've been thinking about Saren's situation at school," he began without greeting. "Stella and I were talking, and we think it might be best if the girls spent more time with us. My neighborhood has better schools." "Not now, David," Liana interrupted. "I'm on my way to my father's will reading." There was a pause. "Right. I forgot that it was today. Any idea what he left you?" The question was too casual, too pointed. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. He owned that bookstore free and clear, right? That's a valuable piece of commercial real estate." So that was it. David was fishing for information about potential assets. Even after 3 years, his opportunism could still surprise her. "I have to go," she said. She ended the call and finished getting ready. A new worry adding itself to her growing collection: if David thought she might be coming into money, he would certainly use it to argue for reduced child support or, worse, push for custody changes. The attorney's office was downtown, in one of the glass and steel buildings that made up the city's modest skyline. Liana parked her aging sedan in the public garage 2 blocks away, not wanting to pull up beside Marcus's Tesla or Vivian's Range Rover. As she walked, clutching her father's photo album to her chest like a shield, Liana rehearsed what she would say to her siblings. The receptionist directed her to the 3rd floor, where Michael Grant, her father's attorney, had his practice. When Liana stepped off the elevator, she immediately spotted her family in the waiting area. No one noticed Liana's arrival at first, giving her a moment to observe them. They looked like what they were: successful, polished professionals with expensive tastes and busy schedules. Marcus had inherited their father's height and broad shoulders but none of his warmth. Vivian had their mother's delicate features, set in a perpetually judgmental expression. It was Marcus who spotted her first. "Finally," he said, checking his watch. Vivian looked up, her eyes cataloging Liana's outfit in a fraction of a second, the slight tightening of her lips indicating her assessment. "Liana, you look rested." Before Liana could respond, a door opened and Michael Grant appeared. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Robert's friend as well as his attorney. "Liana," he said warmly, stepping forward to embrace her. "It's good to see you." The simple kindness nearly broke through Liana's carefully constructed composure. She returned the hug briefly before stepping back. "Thank you for arranging this, Michael." Michael Grant nodded, then turned to the others. "If you'll all follow me, we're ready to begin." The conference room was wood-paneled and formal, with a long table surrounded by leather chairs. Grant took his place at the head, gesturing for everyone to sit. Liana chose a seat on the opposite end from her siblings. "Thank you all for coming," Grant began, his tone shifting to professional formality. "We're here today to discuss the last will and testament of Robert Sterling." He opened a folder and removed several documents. "I'll try to keep the legal language to a minimum." Essentially, Robert's will is straightforward. He had few assets, but what he had, he distributed with clear intent. Marcus leaned forward. "We've been reviewing his finances, Michael. Vivian and I are prepared to handle any outstanding debts." Grant glanced at him. "That's generous, but not necessary." Robert's affairs were in order. He shuffled the papers. "I'll begin with the smaller bequests. To Marcus Thorne, Robert leaves his collection of vintage literature manuals and the sum of $75,000. Marcus blinked, clearly surprised. $75,000. Where would Dad get that kind of money? Life insurance, Grant explained. He maintained a modest policy. To Vivian Thorne, he leaves his collection of rare first editions and the sum of $75,000. Vivian exchanged a look with her husband. The books are worthless sentimentality, but the money is unexpected. Liana sat quietly, wondering what her father might have left her, the photo album, perhaps some small keepsake. She had never expected money or valuables. Grant cleared his throat. Now to the primary bequest. To Liana Thorne, Robert leaves the old tome and all its contents, including the attached apartment, all inventory, equipment, and any other assets associated with the property. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Marcus' incredulous laugh. "The bookstore?" Vivian's expression darkened. "That property is prime real estate, Michael. It's worth far more than the cash bequests to Marcus and me. This is completely imbalanced." Grant remained calm. Robert was very clear about his wishes. "The bookstore goes to Liana, along with everything inside it." Liana sat frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. The bookstore? Her father had left her his business, his livelihood, his home for the past 25 years. "This is absurd," Marcus continued, his voice rising. "Liana knows nothing about running a business. She can barely manage her own finances. Dad must have been confused when he made this will." "I assure you, he was of sound mind," Grant replied firmly. "The will was updated just 8 months ago, well before his health began to decline." Vivian turned to Liana, her expression a mixture of disbelief and irritation. "What did you say to him? How did you convince him to do this?" Liana found her voice at last. "I didn't say anything. I had no idea." "Right." Marcus interrupted sarcastically. "You had no idea he was leaving you a piece of commercial property worth hundreds of thousands." Grant raised a hand. "If I may continue. There is a letter from Robert that he asked me to read. My dear children, if you are hearing these words, then I have passed on to whatever comes next. I hope it is somewhere with good fishing and better coffee." Despite everything, Liana smiled. That sounded exactly like her father. "I know my decision regarding the old tome may come as a surprise to some of you. Marcus, Vivian, you have both built successful lives and careers. You have wealth, status, and security. You don't need a struggling bookstore to add to your portfolios. Liana has faced challenges, a difficult divorce, raising 2 wonderful granddaughters on her own, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Despite these hardships, she has never lost her kindness, her generosity, or her spirit. The bookstore may not seem like much to you. Perhaps you see it as a burden, a failing business in an outdated building. But to me, it represented freedom, opportunity, and the American dream I chased when I came to this country with nothing. It is my legacy, and I choose to entrust it to the child who I believe will honor its significance. Liana, my dear, I know this responsibility may seem overwhelming, but I have faith in you. The old tome has more to offer than meets the eye. Take your time, explore its possibilities, and remember that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. Marcus and Vivian, I leave you with this thought: true wealth is not measured in dollars or property, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. I am proud of your accomplishments, but I hope you will one day understand that success without compassion is a hollow achievement. With all my love, your father, Robert Sterling. When Grant finished reading, the room fell silent. Liana felt tears streaming down her cheeks, her father's words wrapping around her like an embrace. Marcus broke the silence, his voice tight with anger. This is ridiculous. Dad was clearly not thinking straight. The bookstore is a failing business that hasn't turned a profit in years. That's not entirely accurate, Grant said mildly. While revenues have declined, the business remains solvent, and the property itself has considerable value, as you noted. Vivian leaned forward. Liana, be reasonable. You can't possibly want to run a bookstore. If you sell it to us, you could use the money to get a better apartment, maybe even a small house for you and the girls. Liana looked down at the photo album, at her father's proud face the day he purchased the old tome. This was his dream, his life's work. Could she really just sell it off? I need time to think, she said finally. Marcus made a dismissive sound. What's there to think about? That's enough, Marcus, Grant interjected. Robert's wishes were clear. The property belongs to Liana now, and what she chooses to do with it is her decision alone. As the meeting concluded, Liana remained seated, still processing everything, while her siblings gathered their belongings. Vivian approached her, lowering her voice. Think about what's best for your daughters, Liana. That place is a money pit. Marcus and I will give you $75,000 for it. Liana looked up at her sister. $75,000 for prime commercial real estate. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. We're trying to help you, Liana, to spare you the headache of dealing with a failing business. I'll think about it, Liana replied. After everyone had departed, only Liana and Michael Grant remained in the conference room. The attorney watched her with sympathetic eyes. Your father loved you very much, Liana. Liana nodded, still overwhelmed. The bookstore, it needs work. A lot of work. Yes, Grant agreed. He was very specific about you receiving all contents of the property. He emphasized that several times when we drafted the will. Liana looked up, curious. What did he mean by that? Grant smiled. I'm not entirely sure, but knowing Robert, I suspect there's more to the old tome than meets the eye. He reached into his briefcase and removed a small envelope. He also asked me to give you this privately. Liana accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single key, old-fashioned, heavy, and brass, along with a note: some doors are hidden in plain sight. Look with your heart, not just your eyes. Love, Poppy. Liana stared at the cryptic message, a mixture of confusion and curiosity replacing her earlier shock. What doors? What was her father trying to tell her? Michael, she said slowly, did my father ever mention anything unusual about the bookstore? The attorney considered this. Not unusual, exactly, but he was very particular about maintaining ownership. He always said the old tome was more than just a business to him. He paused. Liana, whatever you decide to do with the property, don't rush into anything. Liana tucked the key and note into her purse. I'm not selling, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. At least not yet. I owe it to my father to understand why this place was so important to him. The key from her father's envelope weighed heavily in Liana's pocket as she pulled into the old tome's cracked concrete lot. It had been a few days since the will reading, a few days of fielding increasingly aggressive calls from Marcus and Vivian, who had raised their offer to $300,000 to put her out of her misery, as Marcus had so delicately phrased it. But Liana had remained firm. She needed to understand why her father had left her the bookstore, what he had meant by his cryptic note about hidden doors. And so here she was, early on a Saturday morning, her daughters waiting in the car as she approached the place that was now improbably hers. The old tome had seen better days. The once inviting signboard had faded to a jaundiced shade, and only one of the two display windows appeared functional. The small reading nook attached to the shop had shelves covered in outdated dust, and the whole property had an air of tired resignation. Yet as Liana stood there, memories flooded back. Sitting on the counter as a child while her father worked the register, learning to stock shelves as a teenager, bringing the twins here when they were small, watching them run circles around the aisles while Robert slipped them candy bars when he thought Liana wasn't looking. "Mom, are we going in?" Elara called from the car. Liana nodded, gesturing for the girls to join her. "Yes, come on." The twins approached cautiously, eyeing the building with undisguised skepticism. "This is ours now?" Saren asked, kicking at a weed growing through a crack in the concrete. "Why would Grandpa give us a broken bookstore?" "It's not broken," Liana corrected gently. "It just needs some love." She unlocked the front door, the familiar bell jingling overhead as they entered. The interior was dim, with dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight that managed to penetrate the grime-covered windows. The shelves were sparsely stocked with basic essentials. Classics, a few children's books, some old magazines. The reading nook hummed loudly, containing a meager selection of drinks and snacks. "It smells like Grandpa," Elara said suddenly, her voice soft with memory. Liana nodded, tears threatening as she inhaled the distinctive scent. Her father had spent most of his waking hours in this small space, building his modest business. "Let's check out the apartment upstairs," she suggested, moving toward the back of the store where a door marked "Private" led to a staircase. The apartment above the bookstore was small but surprisingly well maintained, a combined living and dining area, a compact kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. The furniture was old but clean. A hand-carved chest sat on the coffee table. Bookshelves lined with volumes in both English and Spanish. Framed photos of the family in younger, happier days. "It's tiny," Saren observed, peering into one of the bedrooms. "Where would we all sleep?" Liana hesitated. She hadn't actually considered moving in. Their current apartment was cramped, yes, but it was close to the girls' school, to her job at the diner. Yet as she looked around the space, she felt a connection to her father that had been missing these past weeks. "We could make it work," she said slowly. "This could be your room. I could take the smaller bedroom." "What about the bookstore part?" Elara asked practically. "Would you run it?" That was the question, wasn't it? Could she run a business? Should she even try? "I don't know yet," Liana admitted. "First, I want to understand exactly what we've inherited." They returned downstairs to the store area. Liana moved behind the counter, taking in the ancient cash register, the display of local newspapers, the small coffee maker. Everything looked exactly as it had when Robert was alive. "What's through there?" Saren asked, pointing to another door behind the counter. "That's the office," Liana replied. The office was small, with just enough room for a desk, a filing cabinet, and a small safe in the corner. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, and a calendar on the wall still showed the month Robert had passed away, as if time had stopped. Liana sat in her father's chair, running her hands over the worn desktop. What had he been trying to tell her with that key and cryptic note? She opened drawers, finding ordinary office supplies, invoices, tax documents. "Mom, look at this," Elara said, examining the bookshelf against the wall. "These aren't all in Spanish or English." Liana joined her daughter, inspecting the volumes. Elara was right, there were books in what appeared to be Russian, German, Arabic, Chinese, and several other languages she couldn't immediately identify. "I didn't know Grandpa spoke all these languages," Saren commented. Neither did Liana. Her father had spoken Spanish and English, of course, but she'd never heard him speak any other languages. The discovery unsettled her. What else might she not have known about her father? Opening the top drawer of the filing cabinet, Liana found neatly labeled folders, invoices, receipts, insurance. All the expected categories for a small business. But at the back of the drawer was another folder labeled simply, Correspondencia, correspondence. Inside were letters and postcards from all over the world, written in various languages. Some had her father's name on them, while others were addressed to names she didn't recognize. "This is weird," she murmured, setting the folder aside to examine more thoroughly later. The bottom drawer of the cabinet was locked. Liana tried her office key, but it didn't fit. On a hunch, she removed the brass key from her pocket, the one her father had left her in the envelope. It slid into the lock and turned smoothly. Inside the drawer were several items that made little sense in the context of a bookstore: a shortwave radio, a set of what appeared to be encryption keys on a laminated card, 4 passports in different names but all with photos resembling her father at various ages, and a leather-bound journal written in a code or cipher she couldn't decipher. "What is all this stuff?" Saren asked. "I'm not sure, but I think there was more to your grandpa than we knew." Also in the drawer was a small leather pouch. Liana opened it to find foreign currency, euros, pounds, yen, and several other denominations. Quickly calculating in her head, she estimated there was the equivalent of several thousand. Why would Grandpa have all this money in different currencies? Ilara asked. "I don't know," Liana replied. "Maybe he was planning a trip." But that didn't explain the multiple passports or the coded journal. Something larger was at play here. The safe in the corner caught her attention next. It was old, with a dial combination lock rather than a digital keypad. Liana knelt before it, wondering what combination her father might have used. She tried his birthday, then hers, then the date he had purchased the bookstore. None worked. "Try the twins' birthday," Ilara suggested. Liana rotated the dial, 12410, and felt a satisfying click. Inside were several USB drives, a small handgun, and a stack of photographs. The photos showed her father with various people, many in what appeared to be military or official settings. In one, Robert stood beside a man in uniform with decorations that suggested high rank. In another, he was shaking hands with someone who looked remarkably like a younger version of the current Central Intelligence Agency director, though that seemed impossible. "Mom, who are these people with Grandpa?" Saren asked. "I don't know," Liana admitted. "I don't know any of them." What had her father been involved in? The evidence before her suggested something far beyond the life of a simple bookstore owner. But before Liana could process these discoveries further, the bell over the store's front door jingled. Setting down the photos, she quickly closed the safe and drawer, tucking the key back into her pocket. "Hello," she called, stepping out of the office with the twins behind her. "We're not actually open yet." She stopped short at the sight of her brother Marcus standing in the store, his expression a mixture of impatience and disdain. Beside him was a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, carrying a leather portfolio. "There you are," Marcus said, as if they had been looking for her for hours instead of walking in unannounced. "I've been calling you all morning." Liana glanced at her phone, which she had silenced while exploring. "I was busy," she replied. "What do you want?" Marcus gestured to his companion. "This is Arthur Finch, a developer friend of mine. He's interested in the property." Arthur stepped forward, hand extended. "Miss Thorne, pleasure to meet you." Liana didn't take his hand. "Yes, and I'm not interested in selling." Marcus made an exasperated sound. "Liana, don't be difficult. Arthur is prepared to offer $300,000 for the property, $300,000. The figure made Liana pause. That would solve so many problems: a down payment on a house, college funds for the girls, freedom from the constant financial stress. But the items in that drawer, in the safe. What was her father trying to tell her? I need time to consider my options, she said finally. Arthur smiled, a practiced expression. Of course. Taking over a business is a big responsibility. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Liana, be realistic. You're a waitress. You know nothing about running a bookstore. Dad left you a burden, not a gift. Girls, Liana said, maintaining eye contact with her brother, why don't you go upstairs and check out the bookshelves more thoroughly? Once the twins had disappeared up the stairs, Liana turned to Marcus and Arthur. Let me be very clear, I am not selling today. Not to you. Not to any developer. My father left me this bookstore for a reason, and I intend to honor his wishes by at least understanding what I have before making any decisions. Arthur looked to Marcus, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. The sudden hush that enveloped the Metropolitan, one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishments, was absolute, a silence so profound it stole the breath from every patron. Waiters froze mid-stride, diners gently set down their forks, and the pianist's fingers hovered motionlessly above the keys. All gazes converged on a corner table, where Richard Sterling, a figure of impeccable dress and immense wealth, glared at the trembling waitress, Sophia. His voice, a booming crescendo, lacerated the air, demanding an impossible perfection, disparaging her every effort, and seething with an unrestrained impatience. No one in the opulent room dared to utter a sound, until Sophia, her eyes locking with his, spoke a single sentence. It was a declaration so utterly unexpected, so arresting, that it seemed to wrench time itself to a complete standstill. In that profound moment, Sophia's life would irrevocably shift. Sophia, at 28, had never been one to invite drama into her existence. She navigated the arduous demands of 2 jobs, a crushing burden of student loan debt, and the boundless energy of her spirited 7-year-old daughter, Lily, whose constant pleas for dance lessons echoed through their tiny apartment. Such was the ceaseless rhythm of life in New York City. When the Metropolitan, a Michelin-starred sanctuary nestled in the heart of Manhattan, extended an offer for a part-time position, Sophia seized the opportunity with a desperate eagerness. The tips alone, she reasoned, could keep her afloat in a city where fortunes flowed in overwhelming currents but rarely settled among the working class. Perched on the upper floor of an elegant pre-war edifice, the Metropolitan was celebrated for its innovative French-Asian fusion menu and an unwritten dress code that subtly turned away even the slightest sartorial misstep. The staff, attired in crisp black and white uniforms with meticulously embroidered lapels, were trained to an uncompromising standard of excellence. The venerable chef Antoine Dubois, it was whispered, had once honed his craft under a celebrated maestro in Paris, and rumors abounded that luminaries like Taylor Swift or even Mr. David Chen had discreetly graced its tables for private meals. The immense pressure that accompanied such renown was extraordinary, yet Sophia clung to the belief that the job was worth every ounce of effort. The compensation was respectable, the potential tips life-altering, and the environment undeniably polished. As a single mother fueled by an indomitable will, she braced herself for the monumental challenge. Each day, Sophia arrived 2 hours before her shift, dedicating herself to the meticulous setup, precisely aligning silverware, polishing wine glasses until they shimmered like facets of diamond beneath the chandeliers, and imprinting every nuance of the day's complex menu into her memory. She quickly grasped that if Chef Antoine Dubois was in a less than sanguine mood, the entire staff needed to anticipate his every request with an almost prescient intuition. If the sommelier had a particular vintage to recommend, they had to be prepared to articulate its qualities flawlessly. Every minute detail mattered, from the elegant precision of their walk, to the graceful manner in which they held a plate, to the tone and substance of their interaction with each discerning diner. She often found herself utterly exhausted at the close of every shift, yet an unexpected sense of profound satisfaction invigorated her spirit. There was an inexplicable allure in the act of delivering a flawless service, something she likened to the intricate beauty of a dance routine, where every step, every gesture, was meticulously choreographed, every phrase practiced, every smile genuine yet carefully measured. Within a mere few weeks, Sophia found her rhythm, settling comfortably into her new role. She effortlessly charmed couples celebrating cherished anniversaries, corporate groups toasting lucrative deals, and affluent out-of-towners yearning for a taste of Manhattan's rarefied luxury. A thrill coursed through her when her inaugural significant tip arrived, a crisp $200 from a discerning hedge fund manager who greatly admired her profound knowledge of vintage Bordeaux. That precious tip went directly into Lily's dance dreams piggy bank, a symbol of their shared aspirations. Outside the gilded confines of the restaurant, Sophia's world was decidedly more modest. Her tiny apartment in Queens was a cozy, intimate one-bedroom sanctuary, where Lily slept soundly in a corner lovingly partitioned by a soft lavender curtain. The living room seamlessly transformed into their dining space, and the kitchen, barely large enough for her to turn around in, still served its purpose. Yet, they made the absolute most of every inch, adorning each corner with Lily's vibrant drawings of princesses and cherished photographs of exotic locales they ardently dreamed of visiting one day. Despite the ceaseless challenges, Sophia remained unyielding in her determination to provide her daughter with a life that stretched far beyond meager paychecks and cramped quarters. This new position at the Metropolitan felt like a definitive step in the right direction. So, when she clocked in that fateful Saturday evening, she had no inkling that her life was poised for an irreversible transformation. It was a particularly bustling night, with reservations fully booked, largely, as Mr. Harrison, the maitre d', described, by influential figures. This usually signified CEOs, high-profile attorneys, or perhaps even a celebrity discreetly hidden beneath a baseball cap. The entire staff remained on heightened alert, as whispers circulated that a particularly notable millionaire might grace their establishment with his presence. Chef Antoine Dubois paced restlessly in the kitchen, triple-checking fresh, exotic ingredients flown in from across the globe. The sous chefs, with a precision bordering on surgical, prepped dishes. This was the precise night Richard Sterling strode through the grand doors of the Metropolitan. Known to the media as a reclusive millionaire who seldom granted interviews, Richard had amassed his colossal fortune in advanced predictive software, coveted by governments and corporations alike. He held the exclusive patent for a groundbreaking algorithm utilized in everything from intricate stock market analysis to sophisticated facial recognition. Tabloids feasted voraciously whenever he was cited, reporting on every minute detail, from his choice of bespoke suits to the mysterious women occasionally glimpsed by his side. Some sensationally labeled him the next Elon Musk, others proclaimed him the new Mark Zuckerberg. Many characterized him as brilliantly intelligent yet utterly ruthless, a man who allegedly valued his time and immense wealth above all human decency. Yet, to the dedicated staff of the Metropolitan, he was simply Table 9 tonight, and that, according to the restaurant's unyielding code of conduct, was all that truly mattered. Sophia, having diligently studied the intricate seating chart, recognized him as a last-minute VIP addition, precisely the kind of patron who might unblinkingly drop 4 figures on a single bottle of rare wine. She wasn't initially assigned to serve Table 9, but fate, as it often does, possesses a peculiar and unpredictable sense of humor. The restaurant buzzed with the frenetic energy of a hive on the precipice of chaos. Waiters glided across the dining floor like expertly choreographed dancers, swift, silent, and remarkably efficient. Every single seat was occupied, the delicate clink of glasses, the soft rustle of linen napkins, and the subdued hum of polite conversation intermingling harmoniously with the gentle, undulating notes of live piano music. Sophia's assigned section for the evening had originally encompassed tables 5 and 6 and 7, none of them particularly noteworthy. Table 5 hosted a charming couple celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Table 6 was occupied by a solitary diner, far more engrossed in reading his thick biography of Abraham Lincoln than in any form of socializing. Table 7 consisted of a small, refined group of art dealers politely engaged in discussions about an upcoming auction. Sophia had just flawlessly delivered amuse-bouches, a trio of exquisitely delicate canapés, to each table without a single incident. So far, so good. Then came the unexpected twist. Mark, the waiter originally assigned to table 9, slipped silently into the kitchen. It all transpired with a disorienting speed. He was meticulously carrying a tray laden with champagne flutes, heading directly for the VIP section, when a rogue garnish of microgreens inadvertently fell to the polished floor, causing him to lose his precarious footing. Mark tumbled, the flutes and champagne crashing in a spectacular, sparkling arc. He twisted his ankle severely. Mr. Harrison rushed forward, his face anxious and noticeably pale, while Chef Antoine Dubois let out an audible gasp of alarm from behind the pass. In that frantic, adrenaline-fueled moment, Mr. Harrison quickly scanned the bustling restaurant for a suitable replacement. Another server had just commenced her well-deserved break. Another was completely overwhelmed, bogged down with a 12-top table in the opposite corner of the room. His gaze swiftly landed on Sophia. "Sophia," he commanded, his voice edged with urgency, "you're up." She blinked, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. She was undeniably nervous, but the unspoken rule at the Metropolitan was unyielding, an absolute decree: you never, under any circumstances, question an order, especially not in the direct presence of guests. She nodded curtly, retrieved an open tray, and mentally prepared herself to serve Richard Sterling, the reclusive millionaire rumored to be as demanding as he was powerful. Taking a deep, calming breath, she approached table 9. Richard Sterling appeared no older than 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with neatly styled salt-and-pepper hair. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, subtly pinstriped, that likely cost more than a year of Sophia's rent. His wrist displayed a watch that gleamed with an understated opulence, something Swiss, no doubt. Next to him sat a business associate, slighter in build, equally well-dressed, whose name Sophia would later learn was David Miller. Surrounding them were two formidable bodyguards, seated at separate tables, attempting with futility to appear inconspicuous, but failing miserably given their perfectly matching black suits and discreet earpieces. Sophia approached, her posture meticulously aligned, her eyes calm and unwavering. A faint, polite smile graced her lips. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady and composed. "Welcome to the Metropolitan. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with our signature cocktails, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" Richard glanced at her, barely acknowledging her presence. She could discern the subtle flicker of annoyance in his steel-gray eyes, presumably a lingering irritation from the minor commotion surrounding the champagne fiasco. David Miller offered a polite, apologetic smile, but Richard uttered nothing. "Wine list," he muttered, his fingers flying across his phone screen with impatient speed. "Make it quick, and if you have a good vintage of Riesling, bring that." He did not bother to look up. Sophia nodded and quickly hurried to fetch the wine list, consciously ignoring the tightening knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She sternly reminded herself that as a server, her paramount duty was to remain calm, professional, and gracious, regardless of who occupied the table before her. This was the unwritten creed that she and her colleagues lived by daily: be invisible when needed, be supportive when invited, and always, always maintain an unshakable composure. She made a mental note to quickly check the cellar for the recommended Riesling that Chef Antoine Dubois had so enthusiastically raved about. Perhaps it might manage to please him and somehow brighten his sour mood. Returning to table 9, she meticulously presented the list. "We have an excellent Riesling from Napa Valley," she suggested in her most polite and measured tone. "It's a 2001 vintage, quite rare, with delicate notes of peach, apricot, and a crisp mineral finish. Chef Antoine Dubois speaks very highly of it. I believe it would pair beautifully with tonight's specials." Richard paused, then abruptly tossed the wine list aside, as if it were a trivial distraction. He had not once made direct eye contact with her. "Fine, bring it," he snapped. "But let's not waste time with the cheap stuff. I can pay for quality." Sophia nodded, forced a mild, unconvincing smile, and silently stepped away. In the brief moments she spent fetching the bottle and retrieving the precisely correct glassware, she felt a sharp pang of anxiety. There was nothing inherently unusual about demanding guests, some even verging on outright hostility, but there was an unsettling aura emanating from Richard Sterling, an almost palpable electricity in the air that made her profoundly uneasy. Perhaps it was the sheer magnitude of his wealth, or the swirling vortex of rumors about his intimidating personality. Or perhaps it was simply the unsettling reality that she was relatively new to serving such high-profile clients at the Metropolitan. Either way, she knew with chilling certainty that a single misstep could quickly lead to a nightmarish, interminable shift. She meticulously carried out the bottle presentation, carefully showing Richard the label. He impatiently waved it off, allowing her to pour a small sample into his glass. He took a sip, pursed his lips thoughtfully, and nodded curtly. So far, so good. However, when she attempted to eloquently describe the evening specials, he abruptly cut her off mid-sentence. "Stop wasting my time with pleasantries," he said sharply. "Can we just order? I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Bring me the Wagyu beef, seared rare, black garlic sauce on the side, no garnish, and a side of truffle mashed potatoes. Make it happen quickly." Her heart quickened its pace. The Metropolitan prided itself on its elegant plating, all dishes meticulously arranged with delicate garnishes and thoughtful accompaniments. But she had no choice in the matter. "Of course, sir," she said, managing to keep her face perfectly neutral. Turning to David Miller, she politely inquired about his order. He looked profoundly uncomfortable, as though he disliked the palpable tension but was resigned to diligently following Richard's lead. He ordered a bouillabaisse and politely thanked her. As Sophia disappeared into the bustling kitchen to place their urgent orders, she felt the oppressive tension throbbing painfully in her chest. Other staff members furtively whispered about the scene unfolding at table 9. Chef Antoine Dubois was particularly anxious, personally tending to Richard Sterling's meal, desperately wanting to ensure that if this formidable millionaire ever harbored thoughts of investing in a new gastronomic venture, the Metropolitan would undoubtedly be the very first establishment on his list. Unbeknownst to her, the true drama was only just beginning to unfurl. While Richard Sterling slowly sipped his prized Riesling, the rest of the Metropolitan's sprawling dining room remained a whirlwind of refined activity. Waiters delicately balanced gleaming silver-domed trays, the pianist's melodic tunes floated serenely on the air, and well-heeled patrons murmured softly amongst themselves. Yet, an insidious undercurrent of tension visibly crept outward from table 9, spreading like ominous ripples across a placid pond. Sophia was diligently occupied, checking on her other tables. She refilled a champagne glass for the anniversary couple, patiently answered a question about sauce pairings for the art dealers, and politely asked the solo diner if he desired dessert. Despite juggling multiple, demanding requests, she found herself unable to escape the looming sense of dread. She knew with chilling certainty that she would have to return to Richard Sterling's table soon, and her stomach twisted uncomfortably at the mere thought. When Chef Antoine Dubois rang the bell, signaling that Table 9's dishes were ready, Sophia swiftly gathered the plates with practiced, efficient grace. The Wagyu beef glistened, expertly seared, with the rich black garlic sauce presented in a small ramekin on the side. The truffle mashed potatoes were elegantly piped, though the garnish had been omitted precisely as requested. Chef Antoine Dubois had not been pleased, but Richard's demands were absolute and unquestionable. Beside that, the fragrant bouillabaisse, redolent with saffron, ripe tomatoes, and delicate pieces of shellfish, awaited. Sophia emerged from the kitchen and made her way smoothly through the tables, her head held high with an almost defiant poise. As she arrived at Table 9, she gently placed the Wagyu before Richard, then carefully set down the bouillabaisse in front of David Miller. "I hope you enjoy your meal," she said softly, stepping back to maintain the polite, deferential distance required. For a few interminable minutes, Richard picked up his cutlery and began to eat, completely ignoring Sophia's presence. She half expected him to bark some complaint about the temperature or presentation, but to her profound surprise, he seemed too deeply absorbed in his own thoughts to speak. Instead, she observed David's discreet nod, acknowledging the quality of the bouillabaisse, and felt a fleeting sense of relief. But just when she dared to hope that she might somehow glide through the service unscathed, Richard's face suddenly hardened. He set down his fork with a sharp clatter, leaned back in his chair, and pushed the plate away with an abrupt, dismissive gesture. "Waitress," he barked, looking directly at Sophia for the very first time that evening. Her heart lurched violently at his commanding, aggressive tone, but she approached, meticulously maintaining a calm, professional demeanor. "Yes, sir," she answered, trying desperately not to let her burgeoning apprehension show. Richard gestured imperiously to the steak, his expression stormy and irate. "This is raw," he snarled. "I asked for rare, not raw. Are you trying to give me food poisoning or something?" Sophia swallowed hard, her throat tight. She knew with absolute certainty that Chef Antoine Dubois's cooking was impeccable, beyond reproach. The internal temperature of that Wagyu would have been precisely what Richard had requested, executed to perfection. But a server, she knew, never, ever argued in front of a guest. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," she said, her voice measured and composed. "I can have it taken back to the kitchen and cooked further to your liking." He let out a mirthless, scornful laugh, loud enough to cause a few heads at nearby tables to turn curiously. "Cooked further? I shouldn't have to repeat myself. This place is supposed to be top tier. You should know how to serve a steak properly." Sophia breathed in and out slowly, steadily, a silent anchor. She reminded herself of little Lily back home, of the rent that desperately needed paying, of the tips she so utterly relied on to survive. "I understand," she said softly. "Let me fix this for you immediately." "Chef Antoine Dubois." "Well, I don't want excuses," Richard snapped, his voice sharp and unyielding. "I want solutions, now. And while you're at it, bring another bottle of that Riesling, and hurry." David Miller glanced apologetically at Sophia, but he remained silent, utterly helpless. The tension in the dining area visibly thickened, growing almost palpable. "I'm Edward Hayes. I worked with your father for 25 years. Liana shook his hand. "Those men, who were they?" What did they want? Edward sighed. Let's get you somewhere secure first, then we'll explain everything. What about my car? Liana asked. One of our people will drive it back to your apartment, Edward assured her. For now, you'll ride with me. My father, was he really worth $250 million? Edward nodded. Robert was one of our most valuable assets. His cover as a humble immigrant running a bookstore was perfect. No one looked twice at him. But he was instrumental in dozens of critical operations over 2 decades. The compensation reflected his value to national security. And no one in my family knew. Not even my mother. Your mother knew some of it, Edward admitted. Not the extent of his wealth, but she understood his real work. After she passed, Robert became even more committed to his cover identity. They arrived at what appeared to be an ordinary office building on the outskirts of town. Inside, however, was a secure facility with communications equipment similar to what Liana had seen beneath the bookstore. Anna was waiting for them, now dressed in professional attire that suggested her role was more official than she had previously indicated. Liana, she greeted, I owe you an apology for the half-truths. Security protocols required discretion until we could confirm you had accessed your father's video. Who were those men? Liana repeated. They work for an organization that your father helped dismantle in the early 2000s, a network involved in weapons trafficking and intelligence sales. Several of their key members were identified and captured thanks to operations run through the old tome, Anna added. They're not wrong. Your father kept meticulous records. Liana sank into a chair, overwhelmed. And now they're after me because I inherited the bookstore. Yes and no, Edward said carefully. They were watching the bookstore even before Robert passed away, but your refusal to sell and your obvious interest in exploring the property thoroughly escalated their concerns. They need to know what you know, which is why we need to move quickly, Anna interjected. The inheritance your father left you is legitimate and documented, but accessing it safely requires following specific protocols. She slid a tablet across the table to Liana. On it was a document titled Succession Plan, Robert's Operations. Your father prepared for this eventuality, Anna explained. He created a detailed plan for transferring assets, securing information, and protecting you and the girls. But you have decisions to make about how involved you want to be going forward. Liana looked up sharply. What do you mean? Edward leaned forward. The old tome serves an ongoing function in our intelligence network. Ideally, we would maintain that function, but that depends on you. Robert believed you could handle the truth, could even continue some aspects of his work. But he also provided alternatives if that's not what you want. We would relocate the operation, Anna said. The property could be sold. It does have significant commercial value, as your siblings have pointed out. But the underground facility would be decommissioned and sealed first. And if I choose to stay involved? Edward smiled slightly. Then you would receive training, support, and compensation, just as your father did. The old tome would continue its function, and you would become its new operator, maintaining the cover of the bookstore while facilitating the more important work below. I need time, she said finally. I need to think about what's best for my daughters. Of course, Anna nodded. But we should move quickly on securing your assets. Those men tonight weren't the only ones interested in what Robert left behind. Your siblings have also been making inquiries, hiring private investigators, consulting with financial forensic experts. What do you suggest I do first? Liana asked. Edward opened a laptop. We should secure the financial assets immediately. The accounts require biometric verification. Robert set them up to transfer to you upon his death, but you need to complete the authentication process. For the next hour, Liana followed their guidance, providing fingerprints, retinal scans, and voice recognition to secure access to her father's hidden fortune. With each step, the reality of her inheritance became more concrete. Account balances appeared on screen, tens of millions of dollars in various currencies, investments, and holdings. All of this is really mine now, she asked, staring at numbers that seemed unreal. Yes, Anna confirmed, though much of it is in structures designed to remain discreet. By the time they finished the initial security procedures, it was nearly dawn. Liana felt exhausted but also strangely energized. We should get you home, Edward said. Your daughters will be waking up soon. As they prepared to leave, Anna handed Liana a secure phone. Use this to contact us. One more question, Liana said. My siblings and my ex-husband, how much danger have I put them in by not selling the bookstore immediately? Edward's expression grew serious. Your instincts are good, Liana. Your father said they would be. There's something you should know about Marcus and Vivian. Their pressure for you to sell isn't just about the property value. What do you mean? Anna tapped on the tablet, bringing up documents and photographs. Marcus has been involved in some questionable business dealings, including with the very network your father helped dismantle. He may not know the full extent of their operations, but he's been facilitating transfers of technology that have raised red flags. And Vivian? Liana asked. Real estate is excellent for money laundering, Edward said grimly. She's been helping several criminal organizations move funds through property transactions. Again, she may not know who she's really working for, but ignorance isn't a defense. Liana felt sick. Her siblings had built their success on criminal connections, all while looking down on her modest, honest life. Your father knew, Anna added softly. It broke his heart. He was actually investigating them during his final months, compiling information for federal authorities. That's why he left everything to me, Liana realized. Not just because he trusted me, but because he knew Marcus and Vivian were compromised. Edward nodded. Robert believed you were the only one who would use the inheritance ethically. And he hoped that by leaving everything to you, he might force Marcus and Vivian to face consequences before they went any deeper into criminal territory. What about David, my ex-husband? Anna hesitated. Your ex-husband's new wife, Stella, she has connections to a foreign intelligence service. We believe she targeted David specifically because of his connection to your family. The revelation hit Liana like a physical blow. Stella, who called her daughters baggage, was a foreign operative. David hadn't left Liana for love but had been targeted as part of an intelligence operation. Does David know? She asked. We don't believe so, Edward replied. So my whole family? None of us knew who my father really was, and all of us were being used or manipulated in some way. Your father protected you as best he could, Anna said gently. And now we're trying to do the same. But you need to be careful. The people who came tonight will try again, and your siblings may become desperate once they realize you've discovered the truth about the inheritance. When she arrived home, Mrs. Petrova reported that the twins had slept peacefully. Liana thanked her and sent her home. By the time Ilara and Saren woke up, Liana had made her decision. She would accept her father's legacy, all of it. She would protect his work and use the resources he had left her to secure a future for her daughters. But she would do it her way, with transparency and integrity. Mom, you're home early. Ilara observed, finding Liana at the table. Did something happen? Liana smiled at her daughter. Yes, something happened. Something big. And I think it's time I tell you both the truth about your grandpa's bookstore. As the girls listened wide-eyed to a carefully edited version of the truth, Liana felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Her father had carried his secrets alone for decades. She wouldn't make the same choice. She would share what she could with those she trusted, creating a circle of support rather than isolation. So we're rich now? Saren asked when Liana had finished explaining. We have resources, Liana corrected gently. And we'll use them wisely, the way Grandpa would have wanted. Not to show off or to stop working hard, but to create security and to help others. What about Uncle Marcus and Aunt Vivian? Ilara asked. And Dad? Will you tell them too? Liana hesitated. That's more complicated. There are things about your uncle and aunt that I'm still processing. And your father, well, I need to be careful about how much I share with him right now because of Stella. Because of Stella? Saren asked. Yes, partly because of Stella. I have reasons to believe she's not who she pretends to be. We could have told you that. Ilara muttered. She's totally fake. Despite everything, Liana laughed. Her daughters had seen through Stella's facade long before she had the intelligence reports to confirm it. So what happens now? Ilara asked. Are we moving to the bookstore apartment? I think we should, she said finally. At least for now. It needs some fixing up, but it would be a fresh start. And it would honor Grandpa's memory to keep the old tome in the family. The twins seemed surprisingly receptive to the idea. Could we paint our room? Saren asked. Absolutely. Liana agreed. We'll make it our own. As they discussed colors and furniture arrangements, Liana's secure phone buzzed with a text from Anna, meeting at 2 p.m. Critical information about your siblings' activities. Carter will pick you up. 2 weeks after discovering the truth about the old tome, Liana stood behind the counter, watching as the usual morning customers trickled in. Now that she knew who they really were, intelligence operatives, assets, foreign contacts, their behavior made perfect sense. The minimal purchases, the coded conversations, the multiple languages, all part of an elaborate but effective cover for the real business conducted through the bookstore. Liana had spent these weeks in intensive training with Anna and Edward, learning the protocols and systems her father had managed for decades. She had also begun the process of renovating the bookstore and apartment, using a small portion of her inheritance to update the facilities. The twins had adapted to their new home with surprising enthusiasm. The apartment above the bookstore, once cleaned and personalized, had turned out to be more spacious than their previous rental. Saren and Ilara had painted their room in bright colors and arranged their belongings with the care of children who finally felt settled. They attended the same school, with Liana driving them each morning before opening the bookstore. On the surface, they appeared to be a normal family running a modest business. Below the surface, Liana was managing an international intelligence operation while navigating the legal complexities of her extraordinary inheritance. Good morning, Miss Thorne, said a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, placing a newspaper and coffee on the counter. Liana recognized him now as a retired Central Intelligence Agency station chief who still consulted on certain operations. Good morning, Mr. Jensen, she replied, ringing up his purchases. The usual today. He nodded, then lowered his voice. Edward mentioned there might be a package for me. Liana reached beneath the counter for a sealed envelope that had been delivered the previous day through secure channels. Just came in, she confirmed. This was how it worked, ordinary transactions concealing extraordinary information transfers. Liana had quickly learned the rhythm of it, the subtle signs and codes that distinguished regular customers from intelligence contacts. The bell over the door jingled, and Liana looked up to see Marcus entering the store. You're actually running this place? He asked, his tone somewhere between incredulous and contemptuous. Good morning to you too, Marcus. Liana replied evenly. Yes, the girls and I have moved in upstairs, and I'm managing the bookstore now. This is ridiculous, Liana. You're playing at being a businesswoman despite us. I'm honoring Dad's wishes, she corrected. And so far, it's going well. What brings you here today? Marcus approached the counter, lowering his voice. Vivian and I have been patient, but this has gone on long enough. Our final offer is $500,000 for the property. That's far above market value, especially considering the back taxes Dad owed. There are no back taxes, Liana said calmly. Dad's finances were in perfect order. I've reviewed everything with his accountant. That's not what our investigators found. The property has liens against it, Liana. You're inheriting debt, not assets. Your investigators are mistaken, Liana replied. But I appreciate your concern. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again and Anna entered, now dressed in her role as a regular customer. Good morning, she said pleasantly, nodding to Liana and giving Marcus an assessing look. Am I interrupting? Not at all, Liana assured her. My brother was just leaving. Marcus glared at Anna, then turned back to Liana. This conversation isn't over. Vivian and I are meeting with another attorney tomorrow. Dad wasn't of sound mind when he made that will, and we can prove it. After he stormed out, Anna approached the counter. Your brother seems upset. He and Vivian can't accept that Dad left them only $75,000 each while giving me the bookstore, Liana explained. They're looking for ways to invalidate the will. They won't succeed, Anna said confidently. Robert was thorough in establishing his competency. But their persistence is concerning for other reasons. She glanced around to ensure they were alone, then continued in a lower voice. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has been building cases against both of them based on the evidence your father compiled. Marcus' dealings with restricted technology exports and Vivian's real estate transactions with known criminal entities. They're close to making arrests, but wanted to be certain you were secure first. When? Liana asked simply. Soon, Anna replied. Possibly within the week. We wanted you to be prepared. Once they're arrested, there will be media attention, questions about your father, about the family business. We've prepared a cover story that protects the classified aspects while explaining the basics. Liana nodded, a knot forming in her stomach. And David? Stella. Counterintelligence has been monitoring Stella. They'll move on her separately, probably after your siblings' arrests to avoid tipping her off. Anna's expression softened slightly. Your ex-husband appears to be an unwitting participant, but he'll still face questioning. The conversation was interrupted by Liana's secure phone buzzing with an alert. She checked it, feeling a chill run down her spine as she read the message. The twins' school just called, she said, looking up at Anna with alarm. Someone tried to pick them up. The school refused because she wasn't on the authorized list. Anna immediately switched to operational mode. I'll have a team at the school in 5 minutes. Lock up here and wait for my call before doing anything. As Anna rushed out, Liana quickly closed the bookstore, her heart racing. Had Vivian tried to take the girls, or was it Stella? Either way, the escalation to involving her children crossed a line that filled Liana with both fear and fury. Within 20 minutes, Anna called to report that the girls were safe. A security team was escorting them home, and the school had been advised to enhance their verification procedures. The woman who had attempted to collect them had been identified as an associate of Stella's. By the time the twins arrived home with their security escort, Liana had composed herself enough to appear calm. She didn't want to frighten them, but she needed them to understand the seriousness of the situation. Someone tried to pick you up from school today without my permission, she explained as they sat at the kitchen table upstairs. I need you both to be extra careful. Don't go with anyone, even someone you know, unless I've specifically told you it's okay. Was it Stella? Saren asked perceptively. She texted Dad yesterday, saying she wanted to take us shopping this weekend, but he said we were staying with you. This was news to Liana. David didn't mention that to me. He probably forgot, Elara said. He's been acting weird lately. Really stressed. He and Stella fight a lot. Well, I'm glad the school followed the rules and called me. And from now on, one of my friends will be driving you to and from school, just to be safe. Because of Grandpa's secret work? Saren asked, lowering her voice dramatically despite being in their own home. Yes, Liana confirmed. Some people are interested in Grandpa's work, and they might try to use you to get to me. But I won't let that happen. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Liana met with Edward and Anna in the secure facility beneath the bookstore. The discovery of the attempted school pickup had accelerated their timeline. "We need to move on your siblings now," Edward said grimly. The attempt to take the girls indicates desperation. They're escalating because they sense the net closing. "I agree," Anna added. "And there's something else our surveillance picked up. A meeting between Marcus and one of the men who broke in here 2 weeks ago. They're collaborating now, which puts you in even greater danger." "What exactly will happen?" "The Federal Bureau of Investigation will arrest Marcus and Vivian simultaneously tomorrow morning," Edward explained. "The charges will be made public by afternoon. Simultaneously, a separate team will detain Stella for questioning regarding her intelligence activities." "And the men who broke in, the ones working with Marcus now?" "We have a team tracking them," Anna assured her. "Once your siblings are in custody, we'll move on their associates as well." Liana nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Stay here with the girls," Edward advised. "We'll have security in place. Once the arrests are made, there will likely be media interest. We've prepared a statement for you, expressing shock at your siblings' activities, cooperating with authorities, that sort of thing." "And what about the old tome? The underground facility? How do we explain that if reporters start digging?" "The official story is that your father was a confidential informant for federal law enforcement," Anna explained. "It explains his hidden wealth as reward money for information leading to major cases, without revealing the Central Intelligence Agency connection or the ongoing intelligence function of the bookstore." "Is there no other way?" she asked quietly. Edward's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Your father struggled with the same question, Liana. He delayed providing the evidence to authorities for months, hoping Marcus and Vivian would change course. But their activities were too serious to ignore: national security implications, connections to criminal organizations. Robert ultimately chose to protect the country, even at the cost of his own children's freedom." "I need to see the evidence," she said kindly. "Before tomorrow. I need to understand exactly what they've done." Anna hesitated, then nodded. "We can arrange that. But Liana, it won't make tomorrow any easier." Throughout the night, Liana reviewed the files her father had compiled on his own children. The evidence was meticulous and damning. Marcus had knowingly facilitated the transfer of restricted technology to entities connected to foreign intelligence services, accepting millions in payments through offshore accounts. Vivian had helped launder over $100 million for drug cartels through her real estate business, taking a percentage of each transaction. By morning, Liana had come to terms with what needed to happen. When Edward called to confirm that the arrests were underway, she felt a strange calm. This was the culmination of her father's final mission, not just securing his legitimate assets for Liana, but ensuring that justice would be served, even within his own family. The media explosion came faster than expected. By noon, local and national news outlets were reporting the arrests of prominent business leaders Marcus and Vivian Thorne on charges of technology export violations and money laundering. Their connections to international criminal organizations were highlighted, along with the shocking revelation that the investigation had been initiated by evidence from their own father. Liana kept the twins home from school, knowing they would face uncomfortable questions and possibly hostility from classmates whose parents worked for Marcus or Vivian. "Did Grandpa know what they were doing?" Elara asked, her voice small as she watched footage of Vivian being escorted into the federal courthouse. "Yes," Liana admitted. "He discovered it during his last year." "Is that why he left everything to you instead of them?" Saren wondered. Liana nodded. "He knew I would use the inheritance responsibly, and he wanted to protect the work he had done at the old tome." The most difficult call came from David that afternoon. He sounded shaken, desperate. "Liana, have you seen the news? They've arrested Stella. They're saying she's some kind of foreign agent, and they've been questioning me for hours about my connections to Marcus and Vivian. Are you under arrest? Liana asked. No, they seem to believe I didn't know anything. But Liana, this is insane. Your whole family, spies, criminals. What the hell is going on? She could hear the genuine confusion in his voice and felt a moment of sympathy. David was many things: selfish, opportunistic, a mediocre father, but he apparently wasn't a knowing participant in espionage or criminal activity. I can't discuss it over the phone, she said carefully. But David, the girls need stability right now. This is going to be all over the news, and they're going to hear things about their uncle, aunt, and Stella. I need you to be supportive and present, not adding to their stress. There was a pause before he responded, his voice uncharacteristically humble. You're right. Can I come see them? I need to see that they're okay. Liana agreed to a visit the following day, with the stipulation that he come alone and keep the conversation positive. As the day progressed, reporters began gathering outside the old tome, drawn by the connection to the sensational arrests. Liana remained inside with the twins, grateful for the security team that kept the media at a distance. Anna managed the perimeter, occasionally briefing Liana on developments. Vivian's lawyer is already floating the mentally incompetent father defense, she reported during one update, claiming Robert was delusional about his children's activities due to his illness. It won't work. The evidence is too solid, but they'll try to drag his name through the mud. And Marcus? Liana asked. Attempting to cut a deal, offering information on his contacts in exchange for leniency. Typical Marcus, looking out for himself first. Throughout this storm, Liana maintained the bookstore's regular hours, serving the handful of genuine customers who braved the media presence and continuing the intelligence work below ground. The routine helped maintain her equilibrium, gave the twins a sense of normalcy, and demonstrated to the operatives who depended on the old tome that the facility remained functional despite the public scrutiny. A week after the arrests, with Marcus and Vivian both denied bail due to flight risk, Liana received an unexpected visitor, David's mother, Mrs. Davies. I had to see you, she said when Liana let her in. To understand what's happening. David is a mess. The girls must be confused. And you're suddenly running a bookstore and at the center of this scandal. Liana had always liked her former mother-in-law, who had been kind to her even after the divorce. Mrs. Davies had never fully approved of Stella, maintaining a relationship with Liana and the twins despite her son's new marriage. It's complicated, Liana admitted, leading Mrs. Davies upstairs to the apartment. But the girls are doing okay. They get that from you, Mrs. Davies observed, settling at the kitchen table. Liana, I need to ask, did you know? Liana considered how much to reveal. Mrs. Davies was trustworthy, and she deserved some explanation. I only discovered the truth recently, she said carefully. After Dad left me the bookstore, I found evidence he had collected, realized what was happening, and contacted authorities. I had no idea about Stella until they told me she was under investigation. All these years, I thought Robert was just a simple bookstore owner. Then David calls me, babbling about spies and millions of dollars and evidence hidden in secret rooms. It sounds like a movie plot. Parts of it are, Liana acknowledged with a small smile. Dad was not who we thought he was. He worked with federal agencies, provided important information. The bookstore was his cover, and he was compensated well for his service. And now it's yours, Mrs. Davies noted. All of it. The bookstore, the money, the responsibility. She reached across the table to take Liana's hand. I always told David he was a fool to leave you. You were always the strong one, the one with integrity. Robert saw that too, didn't he? Liana felt tears threaten at this unexpected validation. Thank you for saying that. It's been overwhelming. I can imagine. Mrs. Davies squeezed her hand. How can I help? With the girls? With anything? Just being here helps. The girls need their family around them, especially now. Their whole world has been turned upside down. Mrs. Davies promised to visit regularly, to provide whatever support she could. As she was leaving, she turned back with one more observation. You know, seeing you here in Robert's place, it fits. You have his quiet strength, his dignity. The bookstore is in good hands. The following day brought another development. Michael Grant called to inform Liana that Vivian's attorney had officially withdrawn their challenge to Robert's will. With the criminal charges pending, they've decided to stop fighting the inheritance, he explained. Practically speaking, this means there are no more legal challenges to your ownership of the old tome or any of the assets Robert left you. It was a small victory amid the larger chaos, but significant nonetheless. Liana's position was now legally secure, even as her siblings faced years in federal prison. That evening, Liana held a family meeting with the twins. They sat in a small living room above the bookstore, the space now decorated with their belongings, family photos. Things have been crazy these past weeks, Liana began. With Grandpa's secret work, Uncle Marcus and Aunt Vivian's arrests, the reporters outside. I want to check in with you both. How are you feeling about everything? The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Alara spoke. It's weird. Kids at school say our family is like criminals and spies. But Grandpa wasn't a criminal. He was a hero, right? Absolutely, Liana confirmed. Your grandpa served this country for decades. He helped keep people safe. And Uncle Marcus and Aunt Vivian? Saren asked. Are they bad people now? Liana considered her answer carefully. They made bad choices, serious ones. I believe they started with small compromises that led to bigger ones until they were involved in things they shouldn't have been. But that doesn't mean they don't love you or that you can't still care about them. Will they go to jail for a long time? Alara's practical nature always led her to the concrete questions. Probably, Liana admitted. The charges are very serious. But you can write to them, maybe visit sometimes if they want that. They're still family. Saren, always more emotional than her twin, had tears in her eyes. Everything's different now. Dad's sad all the time when we see him. People look at us funny. And you're running a bookstore and doing Grandpa's secret work. Liana moved to sit between her daughters, putting an arm around each of them. Yes, everything is different. But some changes are good ones. We have a stable home now. We don't have to worry about money for rent or college or medical care. And we're carrying on Grandpa's legacy, which is a tremendous honor. She took a deep breath before continuing. I've been thinking about our future, about what we want the old tome to be beyond its special functions. I'd like to rename it Robert's Legacy and renovate it to be both a successful business and a tribute to Grandpa. The idea clearly resonated with the twins, who immediately began suggesting designs and features for the renovation. Their enthusiasm was infectious, reminding Liana that amid all the complexity and pain of recent events, there was also opportunity for growth and new beginnings. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Liana descended to the underground facility for her nightly check-in with Anna and Edward. They had become her mentors, guides through the transition from waitress to bookstore operator to intelligence asset manager. The Federal Bureau of Investigation concluded their interviews with Marcus today, Edward reported. He's provided names and details on his foreign contacts, hoping for leniency. Some of it is actually valuable intelligence. And Vivian? Liana asked. Still maintaining her innocence, claiming she didn't know the source of the money flowing through her properties, Anna replied with a hint of disdain. Liana nodded, unsurprised by her siblings' divergent approaches. Marcus had always been pragmatic, to the point of amorality, while Vivian's pride would never allow her to admit wrongdoing. There's something else we wanted to discuss, Edward said, his tone shifting. Your father left a recommendation letter for you for a position with the Central Intelligence Agency's Cultural Heritage Protection Program. Liana stared at him in surprise. A job recommendation from beyond the grave? Anna smiled slightly. Robert believed you would be an ideal candidate. Your art background, your languages, yes, we know you speak Spanish fluently and have been studying French, and your proven integrity. The program works to recover stolen cultural artifacts and protect heritage sites from trafficking networks. It would be part-time initially, Edward added, compatible with managing Robert's legacy and raising your daughters. I'd like to think about it, she said finally. It's a lot to process. Of course, Anna agreed. The offer remains open. Robert was highly respected within the agency. As Liana returned upstairs, she paused in the store, looking around at the humble bookstore that had concealed so much for so long. Her father had chosen this life deliberately, living simply while serving quietly, accumulating wealth but valuing purpose over possessions. Liana moved to the window, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere up there, she liked to think, her father was watching, perhaps with her mother beside him. She hoped they were proud of her. I won't let you down, Poppy, she whispered. 6 months later, the old tome was unrecognizable. Now Robert's legacy, it featured modern displays, a renovated store with a small cafe section, and a subtle star design incorporated throughout that nodded to both its name and its hidden purpose. Business had increased threefold, with both regular local customers and the special clients who came for more classified reasons. The apartment upstairs had been expanded and remodeled, providing comfortable space for Liana and the twins. Ilara and Saren, now entering their teens, had adapted remarkably well to their new reality. They helped in the store after school, were learning Spanish to honor their heritage, and understood enough about their grandfather's work to respect the security protocols. Liana divided her time between managing Robert's legacy, her new role with the Cultural Heritage Protection Program, and parenting. The wealth her father had left her remained largely untouched, aside from the store renovations and the establishment of the Robert Sterling Foundation, which provided scholarships for immigrant students and support for veterans. Marcus and Vivian had both received substantial sentences, 12 years for Marcus, 9 for Vivian. Liana visited them monthly, a difficult but necessary connection she maintained for the sake of family healing. The visits were strained, with neither sibling fully accepting responsibility for their actions, but Liana persisted, believing that reconciliation, however limited, was worth pursuing. David, cleared of involvement in Stella's espionage activities, had undergone a surprising transformation. The humiliation of discovering his wife's true motivations, combined with the shock of the Thorne family revelations, had prompted genuine self-reflection. They would never reconcile romantically, but they had found a way to co-parent effectively. Anna had become a friend as well as a colleague, teaching the twins self-defense and beginning to instruct them in Russian, much to their delight. Edward visited regularly, often bringing books or historical artifacts that connected to Liana's work with cultural heritage protection. The underground facility continued its essential functions, now with Liana as its primary manager. She had proven adept at the work, her natural intelligence and attention to detail making her a quick study. The operatives who depended on Robert's legacy as a safe location had accepted her readily, many commenting that she reminded them of Robert. On this particular evening, Liana stood behind the counter, watching as Saren helped a customer select coffee beans from the new gourmet section while Ilara restocked the refrigerated drinks. Anna entered, now a familiar presence that required no pretense. "Good evening, Thorne family," she greeted, accepting the cup of coffee Saren immediately prepared for her. "How's business?" "Steady," Liana replied with a smile. "Both kinds." They had developed a shorthand for discussing the dual nature of Robert's legacy's operations. "I have news," Anna said, lowering her voice slightly. The team in Budapest recovered the artifacts. Liana felt a surge of satisfaction. Her work with the Cultural Heritage Program had recently focused on tracking stolen medieval manuscripts believed to be moving through Eastern Europe. Her contribution had helped recover priceless historical documents before they disappeared into private collections. "That's wonderful," she said. "Will they be returned to the original museum?" Anna nodded. With appropriate credit to the anonymous expert who made it possible. After Anna departed and the twins went upstairs to start homework, Liana took a moment to walk through the store, appreciating how far they had come. In 6 months, the renovations had transformed the physical space, but the deeper transformation had been within herself and her daughters. They had gone from struggling financially to managing millions, from being mocked by their wealthy relatives to understanding the true meaning of success and service. Liana paused at the newly installed memorial plaque near the entrance. It featured a photograph of Robert on the day he purchased the old tome, along with a simple inscription. Robert Sterling. Immigrant. Entrepreneur. American patriot. His greatest legacy was not what he owned, but what he stood for. The words captured the essence of her father's life and the lesson Liana hoped to pass on to her daughters. What did you think of Liana's journey from struggling single mother to the keeper of her father's extraordinary legacy? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of hidden value and unexpected discoveries, please consider subscribing to our channel for more stories like this. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface.